So today we're going to look at the parable of the unforgiving servant, and it is in, just get straight into the word. It is in Matthew 18, verses 23 to 35. So first of all, just read it, and then I'll briefly summarize it. Then we'll drill down into the gospel parallel of this parable, and then look at some barriers to unforgiveness and what to do about that. Okay, I'll just read this out. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with the servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all he had to be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him, cancelled the debt, and let him go. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, and I will pay it back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said, "I cancelled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. That is a very sobering parable, isn't it? So the context of this is that 2 verses up, Peter, he asks this question on how to resolve relational issues, how to resolve relational and emotional conflict, because we'll always have that as long as we're in relationships with our brothers and sisters and with people all around us. There'll always be relational issues because we're all broken and we all have different backgrounds and different personalities. And he says, Lord, and about forgiveness. So forgiveness, he says, Lord, how many times should I forgive a brother or sister? And he said, 7 times. And then Jesus said, nope, 70 times 7. So what Peter thought was being very generous, because in the Jewish culture, you were taught that forgive up to 3 times, and that's plenty, that's enough. And then it's like 3 strikes, you're out. And then after 3 times, you don't have to forgive anymore. And so he thought, yeah, I'll just double that and add 1 more. And so I'm pretty generous. And I think that's what Jesus wants us to do. But no, when Jesus said no, it's 70 times 7, he actually didn't mean 490 times. He meant limitlessly. So we are to forgive people limitlessly, just whenever we need to. In fact, live a forgiving lifestyle. Keep your heart soft and be a forgiving, a merciful person. And that's why he told this parable. He told this parable to drive that point in, and he also to explain why and how we can forgive from the heart. So when you look at this parable, it's a story of a king who had a servant and this servant owed the king, in today's monetary value, billions of dollars. So a very large, a very big debt that he was unable to pay back, basically, and an impossible amount to pay back. And so he begged the king, and the king, to his surprise, forgave him. The king was so merciful, and the king didn't actually want him to pay even back a little. He actually cancelled the entire debt, everything that he owed. And isn't that amazing how merciful and gracious and generous the king was? And the servant didn't have to do anything for that. So the servant received the forgiveness of debt, but then he turned around and he had a fellow servant who owed him a much, much smaller amount by comparison, maybe a few $1,000s. But he didn't treat his fellow servant with the same mercy and the same grace and the same kind of heart that the king had shown to him. So the servant couldn't pay him back. The servant begged him, his fellow servant, but he said, no, no way. You will pay me back that debt, every cent of it, and I'm going to throw you into jail so you can pay me back. And then, so did he show mercy? No, he showed the opposite. He was very harsh. He was very unkind, and he just did not show his fellow servant the same kind of mercy. So the king found out, obviously, and so the king saw that, wow, why didn't you treat him like how I treated you? Why didn't you pass on that mercy? And so he said, okay, well, the same that you did to this fellow servant of yours, I will do the same to you. And I'm going to throw you into jail, and you will be tormented until you pay back all that debt. Now, that sounds very harsh. And I was like thinking, yeah, why is God so strong on that at the end when he says back to that servant that he's going to be thrown to jail until he pays back? He'll be tormented until he pays back his debt. Well, because forgiveness and mercy is at the very heart of our God. And forgiveness is the core message of the gospel. See, because we are all sinners in need of forgiveness from a holy and a sinless God. And the debt that we owe to God can never be repaid. How do we sinners pay back the debt? The wages of sin is death. We deserve punishment, but God sent Jesus to take on our debt, to take on our sins, and take on the punishment that was due us. And so Jesus paid for our debt. So that's the gospel parallel of this parable. And, and also the other point is that we sin against a holy God, right? So we're sinners, we sin against a holy God, a God who is perfect and just and sinless. And that is a huge offense, right? Us sinning against God. And that offense is so much more smaller, and it's incomparable, and it's insignificant to the sins that we sin against a fellow brother or sister who is also a sinner. So sinner to sinner, those sins are small and incomparable to how we sin towards a holy and a perfect God. Yet God forgave us of our debt. So how much more should we forgive a fellow brother or sister, a sinner who sins against us? So God wants us when we have received his grace, we have received his mercy, we have received his forgiveness, and he wants us to carry that heart of mercy and forgiveness, and because we received it, to pass it on to a fellow brother or sister, or anyone really. So that is basically the message of this parable, and that's the good news. We've been freely forgiven by God for all our sin, so now I'm free to forgive others of their sins. I have been forgiven, therefore I will forgive. And this is a revelation and the truth that we must embrace in our heart and extend it to other people. All right, so now let's take a look at unforgiveness and the mindsets that are barriers to our letting go of unforgiveness. I'll just be getting a bit more practical here. Say if a person comes up to you and they say, I know I should forgive, but I can't. Well, I think there's mainly 3 reasons why they say this. Number 1, it's too painful for them to face the pain. They just don't know how to process that pain. They don't know how to even begin to deal with that pain. So they hold on to the bitterness. Unforgiveness turns into bitterness when you hold on to unforgiveness. Number 2, or they have misbeliefs, just wrong ideas about what forgiveness really is. So they also just find it easier to just hold on to bitterness. And number 3, or they simply just harden their heart and choose to hold on to bitterness. Yeah, those are the 3 main reasons. So let's break down those 3 main barriers to forgiveness. So maybe we can help ourselves or help a brother or sister who's struggling to forgive. All right, so we can see that you don't just get bitter instantly. Bitterness actually grows like the fruit on a tree, and it begins with a seed, and it begins with an unresolved hurt. So there is a progress to bitterness. It starts with a hurt, which leads to resentment. Resentment leads to unforgiveness. Unforgiveness leads to bitterness. And now, when we turn bitter, that brings with it a lot of pain and a lot of destruction, doesn't it? Yeah, so it's all about, so if a person finds it hard to forgive because they've grown so bitter in their heart, and it's defiling their whole heart, the whole person, it's starting to defile relationships all around them, you really have to look at opening up their heart, and that they're ready to face it, basically it's about them facing the pain, having to face the pain and tracing it all back to where they were hurt, where they were offended, where the disappointment started, and then just facing that disappointment or hurt and talking about it. So acknowledging the pain, acknowledging how much the pain was, putting the feelings into words, and then just processing it, then letting it go, and then moving on to letting go of resentment, which is, that feeling of injustice, that something is very unjust, that's unfair, that's not right, which if we hold on to that, then, it leads to unforgiveness, which is holding a grudge against somebody, holding something they did wrong against, attaching it to them and connecting it, tying them together, their sin, and tying it to them and just holding a grudge for them about that. And then if we don't resolve that, then it leads to bitterness, obviously, where it goes so much deeper into our heart and soul, and it defiles our whole person and the people around us. So resolving the hurt, the resentment, the unforgiveness, and then you can resolve the bitterness and finally be able to let that go. Yeah, freely, so you can be free, so you can have peace and freedom. So that's how you deal with that issue of someone who's like, I want to forgive, but I just can't because I'm just so struggling with this. So they really have to go back and talk about it, peel off the layers and deal with that. Now, the second thing is, the second problem is if somebody says to you, well, I don't want to forgive because, and then they have all these different reasons. Well, can I suggest that maybe they just have wrong ideas about what forgiveness is and what it isn't? So let's look at what forgiveness is first. So actually, let's even look at what forgiveness is. So when someone sins against us, it's like they take money from us, right? So they incur debt. Somebody takes money from you, they have to pay it back. There's always a cost. There's always a cost to sin, right? And vice versa, the other way around. So to forgive means to cancel their debt, cancel what they owe you. Forgive is a financial term as well. Like if somebody forgives your debt, then they're cancelling your debt. So forgive equals to cancel. And how do we cancel the debt? Well, we let go of it. And how do we let go of? We just speak out what we need to let go of. So we need to let go of our desire to get even. So what are we letting go of? To forgive. We're letting go of our desire to get even, to take revenge, letting go of our desire to retaliate, to make them pay. And yeah, we're just letting it, as we're letting it go, we're speaking it out from ourselves. Yep. And forgiveness is also for ourselves. It's not for the other person. You can't control what other people do to you, but you can choose what to do and how you react. We can take responsibility for your reactions. So it's for you, your own personal freedom, for your own peace of heart. That's what forgiveness is for. It's not for the other person. Forgiveness is also wholehearted. You do need to desire it first from your heart. You do need to yes, I do want to forgive with my whole heart. And then I need to decide on that as well. Decide to take action. Decide to move forward in a process. Forgiveness is also a process as well. So it's not instant. Sometimes it's not instant. You know why? Because sometimes the trauma is so deep. It goes back many, many years. It's deep, and also it could have taken a long time. The hurt could have been incurred over a long period of time. So the more deeper the hurt, the wounding, the trauma, the longer it is, the more layers it is to work through that. And so that's why sometimes it's a process to work through down to the resolving of the hurt. Forgiveness is necessary for your healing as well. If you want to be healed in your mind and your heart and emotions, if you want to have peace, you want to have freedom, you must forgive. And forgiveness is also necessary for your walk with God. If you have unforgiveness in your heart, obviously it's going to create a wall. Your heart's going to be shut off. You'll shut out not only, pain if you think so in a deceiving way, but you also shut off other people's input, but also shut off God's love and God's voice from your life. So it's totally necessary to forgive. So that's what forgiveness is. And so we'll also look at now what forgiveness isn't. So some of these ideas that we have about forgiveness, what it isn't, it stops us from being able to okay, now I will forgive. I'm ready to forgive. So what isn't forgiveness? Okay, so it isn't dependent on the other person. Forgiveness is never dependent on the other person. As I said before, you choose to forgive, you are in control of your feelings and emotions. You can't control someone else. And second thing is, and it doesn't always mean reconciliation. Reconciliation means to restore to a right relationship. You get back together with the other person, everything's all good. Of course, that applies in a marriage, but then sometimes it's just one-sided. You decide to forgive, but the other person will not forgive you. They will not change. So it doesn't always mean reconciliation. It means that once you've forgiven, you're all good and you're ready to move forward. And that other person, whatever they do, that's their responsibility. Also, the other person might have passed away, they might have moved away, or sometimes they're just unsafe to be around. So that's why reconciliation isn't necessary after forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't trust. That's a separate issue. So trust is allowing that person to freely enter back into your life, and you know there's that reconciliation there. Also, boundaries. Yeah, you need to set boundaries around you for healthy trust to develop and grow. And sometimes trust just takes time to earn back. It does always takes time to earn back and to rebuild. Trust must be earned. It's not instant, and it's not just an act of the will. It is a process. Yeah, but forgiveness can be instant. You can instantly, when you're ready to forgive, you can instantly forgive from a decision from your own heart. Forgiveness isn't always instant or one-off. That's my next point. Sometimes it is instant when the hurt isn't too deep, or it isn't too bad. Yeah. Sometimes it is an act of the will, but other times it's working through a process, acknowledging the pain, what we felt, and then letting go. Forgiveness isn't condoning the sin or wrongful behavior, and it isn't general either. So if you really want to forgive someone thoroughly, you need to be specific about where the hurt is and what happened, what was said, what was done. It's very, very specific. So if you've been hurt a lot, you can't just go, oh, generally, okay, I forgive that person for everything they ever did. No, because, when hurt happens, when traumas happen, you form beliefs that really grow deep down into your soul. And sometimes these beliefs are so strong that we've embraced them and we live out of them, and we don't even know that it was caused by this one incident way back, 15, 20 years ago, or even in our childhood. So you have to always be specific. You must release forgiveness specifically over every specific situation. So you process through that. Forgiveness isn't also about forgetting. So if you're truly forgiven, though, you can remember the incident, you can remember what was done to you, what was said, but there's no pain with it because you're free when you're forgiven. You're free in your heart of any negative emotions when you've truly forgiven. So when the memory comes back, you can remember it, but there's just no pain with it. So it isn't always about forgetting. You do remember what happened. It's just that when you've forgiven, there's no pain with it when it comes. And forgiveness isn't about forgiving only others as well. So sometimes we don't realize it, but we hold grudges about ourselves, and we also sometimes blame God, and we don't forgive him either. So always when you're looking at forgiveness, look at forgiving others, but also maybe you have unforgiveness towards yourself or towards God. So those are the misbeliefs about forgiveness, what it isn't. Do you believe any of those things? Is that what's stopping you from forgiving and letting go of the bitterness? Maybe it's something to look into. Finally, I just want to finish with a final question, a final barrier to forgiveness. If somebody says, why should I forgive? Why should I forgive? That probably comes from a pretty proud and stubborn heart. I've been there many times. And the short answer is because we are sinners who've been forgiven, and that's why we must forgive. So if we refuse to let go of the pain, we make a choice. But we can also, on the other hand, make a choice to let go of the pain. If we choose to harden our heart to God and we refuse to forgive, at that point, we invite, and this is very serious, we invite demonic power. We invite demons into our emotions. Well, we're already believing in lies that, this person is blah, blah, whatever, or the toxic feelings and thoughts we have about them. The lies are already there, and demons are attracted to lies. That's all they ever do. They just lie. So when we harden our hearts and we hold on to bitterness, we're actually inviting demons to torment us. They will torment us in our mind and emotions. You may have nightmares. You will just feel that energy, the negative energy, rage, anger, all that. And it's driven by demonic spirits because you invite them in because you refuse to let go of forgiveness. And so therefore you become enslaved to the demonic spirits. And this leads to a downward spiral in your mental health, in your heart, and also a downward spiral in the relationships around you. There's barriers, there's lots of problems, lots of hurt, lots of pain. So it's really awful, isn't it? We will be tormented until we remember that God, he's forgiven me. I need to forgive. So that takes a decision to start to begin to now face the pain, resolve the hurt, let go of the resentment, let go of the unforgiveness, let go of the bitterness. And when we let it go, we can exchange it for God's peace, for joy, for freedom. And then we can enjoy all our relationships. I'd rather enjoy relationships rather than suffer and have angry episodes every day, which is what used to happen to me. And now I've enjoyed peace and joy for so long that, all that other stuff in the past was just awful and I hate it now. It's like, you eat good food for so long, you just hate eating the junk food. And then you're able to release God's love and mercy and forgiveness to others and ourselves. And people can see Jesus in and through you. And that is the whole point of receiving forgiveness and releasing forgiveness so that, people can see Jesus in us. Well, thank God. We do thank God for his mercy and grace towards us. So what a loving and a gracious God we serve. I'm so grateful for that. All right, so I've really rushed through this parable. I hope you guys got something from that. And now it's time for our breakout rooms. So here are the questions to ponder and discuss. Maybe there's something else on your heart. Maybe you have a question. I encourage you to ask the other people in your room and ask them to pray for you. Number one, what do you think would be the signs of unforgiveness in someone's life? Number two, who would you find hardest to forgive? Yourself, God, or others, and why? And how can you keep your heart soft on a daily basis?